Ladies and gentlemen, listeners, lovers, and friends, welcome back to the podcast at Two Ticks and the Dog Productions up above Dave Grohl Alley, right down the way from Modern Methods Brewery, where we will be sampling some Panthertown beer today. As my co-host today, who sits in for MDI Studios' Brandon Giovanni, is here with us as a guest today, Barry Berkey.
Hello.
Welcome to the show. He's already cracked a, what kind is that?
Scrappy German.
This is the, so if you listen to the episode that had Ron Book brought us some Scrappy German, and now Barry apparently is.
And thank you, Adam. I mean, these were on the house from him today.
Yeah, Barry got here a little bit early, and I actually I home brewed some beer because I wanted to know what that experience was like, and I also brought some Panthertown, and Barry got here early and was like, you know what? I'm going to head down the alley and see if I can get some beer. And, of course, Adam was there and gave us a few on the house. Thank you, Adam Keck.
Yeah, buddy.
Modern Methods Brewery, episode, I don't know, 31 or something. He's in season 2 also. Of course, huge shout out to our boys at Coates Car Care, season 2 sponsor of the podcast this year, where they have allowed us to do a weekly Express exterior wash giveaway. Give it good at all 5 of their locations. All you got to do is go to theprodcast.net and sign up for giveaways, and we will draw your name, if you're lucky enough, out of the hat. And you can win. We'll mail you an Express exterior car wash courtesy of Coates Car Care, the leader in car wash and car care, car everything in the Valley. Locations Austintown, Howland, Niles, Cortland, and Hermitage, Pennsylvania. If you go to their website, coatescarcare.com, powered by MDI Studios, you can download their app now. So if you have an iPhone or you have an Android, you can download their free app, purchase single washes, and you don't even have to roll your window down. So if you got COVID, or if you're worried about COVID, and you still want to get your car washed, you don't have to exchange money. You can literally show up after you've bought the wash on your app, hold your phone to the window, and they barcode scan you, and in you go. And you got the cleanest car in town. So thanks to them. Want to introduce today our guest. I'm very excited to have him. We have not had a whole lot of writers on per se. And our guest today is not only a novelist and has his BFA in theater, but also spent a couple of years on the staff writing for Cybil Sheppard's show Cybil. Was that on ABC?
That was CBS.
CBS? Sorry, CBS. Today, we want to welcome...
I'm sure they're sorry, too.
Want to welcome to the show Mr. Michael Dempsey, screenwriter, television writer, and author of a fine sci-fi noir book called Necropolis that I can't wait to dive into here later on this weekend. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You are welcome. Thanks for taking the time to come here. Now, tell me, you're from Youngstown originally.
Yeah, I grew up in Boardman.
And at some point in the 90s, you end up in Los Angeles and you end up writing for Cybil. How's that happen?
Well, Jim, it's a long story.
Give us the abbreviated version because the show's only an hour long.
Well, I was a musician actually in high school. And when I was a kid, I wrote like science fiction stories and stuff like that.
What instrument you play?
Violin.
Oh.
I got a violin scholarship to Ohio State, and I went to Ohio State, and about a year and a half in, a friend cast me in a play, and that was it.
Got the bug.
Did
you do any stuff at Boardman beforehand?
No, I did some duet acting the last year, which is part of speech team, but is acting, and that was it. So then I got really interested in performing. So I went and got my BFA in theater and musical theater, and then after that...
From the Ohio State University?
From Ohio State, right. And then I spent a year at Actors Theater of Louisville, which is one of the country's really large regional theaters, professional theaters, and because they have a apprenticeship company. So they pick, I don't know, 14, 15 people a year. They audition all over the country, and they go and they use them as slave labor, and they teach them, and they get to work with professional actors from New York, like we were talking earlier, Julianne Moore, and a lot of people like that.
I just love those redheads.
Yes. I know. I was a redhead before I was a skinhead, which basically means bald. So it was really amazing training for the first year. And then I went to New York, and that's when I really started writing again. And it was comedy for the theater and short little things and little plays off Broadway and stuff like that. And a talent scout for the Carsey Warner Company, which has produced everything.
Yeah, big.
Roseanne, right. Cosby, Cybil, they've been going for like 30 years. So he saw one of my little plays, and he talked to me, and he said, well, if you're going to write comedy, if you want to make a living, if you want to make any money writing comedy, you need to come out to L.A., and so it was the tiniest sliver of a connection. And it was like the cliche, you put everything you own in your Grand Am and you spend 3 days driving across the country. And there's a guy named Jack LaJudas who's from Youngstown, who's a TV writer. And through my dad, I met him, and it was like perfect because he had a sublet right below him. He had a guy living that was gone for the summer, so I could sublet it, and he took me under his wing. And I got there. And this is funny. I drove into L.A. and this is way before cell phones and everything. And there's a really famous, secluded Hollywood stars restaurant at the front of the building. So I pull in. I've been driving for like 12 hours, and I pull in behind this car, and I just tap it, and the alarm goes off.
Man.
And
that's a welcoming.
And then out of the restaurant comes Jerry Seinfeld, because I have tapped his $200,000 handmade Porsche or whatever.
Holy shit.
And he looks at me, and I have a Seinfeld spec script in my car. And for like 15 seconds, I thought, how tacky are you willing to be? And I didn't do it, but he and his friend were like, looked at me, and then he realized I wasn't a killer or anything. So, and Jack, I was super lucky. And of course, in Brooklyn, I lived in Brooklyn for 5 years in New York, and you do the deal. You temp, and I lived in right off of Park Slope, which hadn't become gentrified and trendy yet,
Sure.
And in a little roach-infested studio, painted pink and horrible, and fifth floor, walk up, and it was the whole thing. And this was like during the Dinkins days, even before Giuliani. That's how old I am. And so Times Square was still like all hookers and porno palaces and stuff, and a lot more interesting, to me at least, than the Disney version that's there now. And so anyway, I through a couple people I knew, some agents read my stuff, but in Brooklyn, I got up at 5 o'clock, 4:30 every morning, and I wrote, before I got on the train, and I took every class I could, and I read every book I could on comedy writing, and I wrote TV script after TV script and play after play. And so when I got out there, I had a really weird play that is not the kind of thing you would think Hollywood would go for at all. It's a farce that is a dark farce. And this agent, snapped me up, UTA, and it was like the third biggest agency in the world. And that was 3 or 4 months into being there. And 3 or 4 months later, I was on Cybil, and it's just, there are people a lot more talented than me that spend years and years breaking in and maybe never break in, And so even though, I was prepared in the sense that I worked, had worked really hard, I was also at the right place at the right time. And, and then, a year and a half, 2 years later, half the staff got fired by some.
Well, I think that's, you've said this a couple times in our conversations prior to the show, which was, I got really lucky. I've found in my experience, limited as it may be, that luck is an important thing, but you got to have the ability. You just said something really important. You said, now, UTA, for listeners out there, is United Talent Agency. This is a major... Sorry. Yeah, no, you're good. This is a major talent agency. You know, CAA and UTA.
Yeah, I was at CAA
ICM.
for a while too. My agent went over there.
And these are huge. These are where all the big stars and all the big directors and all the big writers are repped. And so for you to even get in the door there and to be repped by them is a major accomplishment. But you set, and people always say like, oh, that person's really talented, as if it was just like this God-given thing that was, you were touched, and because of that, that's why. And if you don't have that lucky touch, that you're not going to get it. But you said something brilliant, which was, I got up at 4:30 every morning and I wrote before I took the subway or the train, wherever you're heading. That's the discipline, right? So you have ability and you probably have talent, but you have the work ethic to do it. And a lot of people, I think, that are the dreamers, you got to be a dreamer to start off with anyways, but you got to put in the time, and you obviously put in the time to do it.
Yeah. I mean, you could tell, I would go to like a writer's workshop, and you could tell the guys that were never going to get anywhere because they were not teachable, first of all. Mm-hmm. You know, we'd all critique each other's work, and they would always have a reason we were wrong, and you know, I don't know, we'll get to it, but the show I'm working on now, it's like this guy playing King Lear is Cleveland royalty, professional actor. He's just unbelievable. And he's like, give me any direction you want. He will take the smallest direction, you know. And that's how he got there, you know, because he stays open, you know. He still wants to learn. And that's me, too. I love a new challenge, you know.
Hence the King Lear project.
Well, COVID, I mean, it's a whole new thing, right?
Tell us about it, since we're talking about it.
Well, there's a local theater company, Mahoning Valley Players, and they've done free Shakespeare in the Park since 2011 out at the Morley Pavilion, and they've done a lot of really interesting things, and they did an all-female Julius Caesar and modern and traditional, and you know, they're big on gender neutral and racially diverse, which is all fantastic, and. So I was slated to direct King Lear in the theater at YSU. July 10th we were going to open, right?
Oh, okay.
And then, you know.
Yeah, the coronavirus came to visit. Thanks, coronavirus. Asshole.
Fuck yeah. Who do you think you are?
Bastard.
We're going to teach you a lesson, buddy. And then the question was, what do you do? You know, most theaters canceled. The arts got hit really hard. You know, who's going to go into a theater, right? So dance, Broadway shut down, the movie industry shut down, and so I was like, what do we do? And I said, you know what? We've got to be like torchbearers and keep that flame alive. Because first of all, the stress of being isolated, everybody had their shows that they were involved in canceled. And I thought, well, Shakespeare is kind of, it's not realism, you know, it's already heightened. So there's a little artificiality to it. And I thought, well, why don't we give it a try? Doing concerts, when you see all the Zoom concerts and stuff, some of which are amazing, it's much easier to do that because there's not that sort of direct interaction. You know, you get a click track and everybody plays, and you know. So trying to create a sense of people being in the same scene and reacting emotionally and all those kinds of things, that's more of a challenge. And there's been some stuff, and it's mostly been like Reader's Theater stuff, you know, with good actors, and it's mostly right to the screen and everything. And so I thought, well, you know what? Let's give it a try. Let's go virtual. And what happened then was really astonishing, because suddenly we realized you didn't have to be local to audition for this. And so it kind of went viral, the audition notice and everything. I made a little cheesy Adobe Rush, you know, premiere with lightning and thunder and stuff, because there's a famous storm scene. And next thing I knew, and you know, they had to do video submissions. It was all, you know, it was all online, and which is becoming more common
Standard,
anyway.
sure,
But
yeah.
I had never cast an entire show through video. That's really hard when you can't see people, up close up. And the next thing I knew, my cast. I have actors. I have an actor in L.A. I have an actor in Texas. I have an actor in a couple from New York. Jersey, Chicago, Cleveland, Youngstown, and Wales, and
Nice.
South Carolina, and probably a couple other places. And that became suddenly really exciting. The fact that, hey, you know what? and everybody was so jazzed, and of course, trying to get people together to rehearse like across 8 time zones is an interesting challenge. I'm brilliant enough to, have people in the same scene who are in LA and Wales, so how do you do that? But, and then rehearsing, it was through Zoom we've been rehearsing, but we're not shooting it that way. And that's another sort of audacious, who knows if it's going to succeed kind of thing. So we decided, this is a big experiment. And let me tell you, they have been all in. I've never, there are no divas in this cast. I mean, there are 33 people, and every one of them is building their own little makeshift green screen because we want to try, to lay some things in and, do some things. And I've been working hard to sort of develop a new visual vocabulary that there are things you can't do, and so what works, what doesn't, what's going to look stupid, what doesn't, but first and foremost is the talent of these people is astonishing. We had we had a local teacher, Candy Cleveland, who has a theater group in Lisbon, and some few students, sit in, and she was like, oh my God, and it's true. They're really amazing, and like I said, they're all in. So trying to get props and costumes, they have to get stuff. I have to ship them stuff. We have to figure it out. And even though I've worked on sets and PA'd, and I've been on movie sets and on TV sets and all that, it's different. This is so different.
Sure.
And because it's going to be 30 cameras, 30 cell phones and webcams and all of that, we're individually recording, and then they send me the footage, and I have to try to match it all, make in green screen, and make them look, like they're sort of in the same place, And so we're trying to push the envelope instead of just, people sitting in their house reading and looking at the screen. We'll see what happens, and I think a lot of people are going to be doing this too. But it's and again, I love those challenges. I'm having to. I mean, I knew how to edit. I knew Adobe Premiere and stuff, but there's like a whole new level in chroma key. Like it's way out there, and so I have a rehearsal, and then I stay up till 1 a.m. watching YouTube tutorials, and then going back and trying stuff and. I'll never be able to do this. I'm sorry, I'm destroying your technology.
You're
here.
good, man. You're good.
And so that keeps your juices flowing, and I think that's the same thing with them. And all of a sudden, it was at first trying to connect with other people through this barrier.
Sure.
We were like, and now it's happening.
Well, now you're all moving to the same purpose, to the same goal, which is to make this thing as best as possible.
Yeah. And it's a compressed time frame. Normally I would rehearse, oh my gosh, for Shakespeare I would take,
I was going to say, especially
9-10 months,
right?
9-10 weeks.
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah.
You would sit at a table for just a couple of weeks because you got to go through, and everybody's going to know exactly what everything means, and before you even put it on its feet. And we did it in a record amount of time, and again, these people are really good and really fast, and you give direction and they come back the next time, and it's there. They've worked on it and gone farther, and so that makes your life easier. There's nothing worse than giving an actor the same note 3 times, and you're like, oh fuck, it's never gonna happen. So I gotta let go of that. Talk about killing your darlings. It's like, and and so I couldn't be more thrilled about that, and we'll see.
Well, your energy in talking about it is making me excited to see it.
Well, that's good.
We talked about it the other day, and for people who aren't production folks, or they don't know the language, or they don't know the setup, when it's not just you just shoot it on green screen and then it's a button touch and you've keyed in a scene.
Oh, yeah.
And especially when you have multiple cameras. You talked about you had 33 or 30, 31 or 33, whatever it is.
Close to that, yeah.
Actors, everybody's shooting with a different color temperature in the room. The lighting setup's probably different. The green isn't exactly the same. And so you got somebody that shot on an Android, somebody that shot on an Apple, and one person maybe shot in a room with lights, but the filler light is fluorescent, and somebody else shot it, and so the color temperature is different, but they're in the same scene.
Oh, yeah.
So that is really...
Good luck.
And
presents a real technical problem, man. Yeah. Or not problem, but a challenge.
Yeah. Well, and thank you. I mean, for you gave me the suggestion that, black and white may be the way to go, and for some or all of it, that might be a good thing, because and then it's finding stylistic ways to represent. Like I said, first of all, Shakespeare has its own reality, but there's things you can't do. There's like a really important kiss. There are sword fights. There's the British Army against the French Army at the end. I mean, there's stuff because you can composite people in the same scene, but you can't, unless you're George Lucas, you're not going to try to make them touch, and what I mean. There's no way to. So it's like, how do I come up with a stylized but not cheesy way? And so, so I'm doing storyboarding and all this kind of stuff. And so when we shoot, we'll figure it out. It's very complicated.
Yeah.
And but I have to know exactly, what happens in every shot, and we'll see what happens, and then I'll see what I have, because you can only concept so far, and then you see what you have, and then what do you do? And it's, I got to keep out of the way of these great actors mostly.
Well, I think that's the great starting point, is that you said, I've got some really great actors. And so the production stuff, people will be forgiving a little bit about if the production values aren't up to, what you think are par, because you have these actors. And you said something else the other day. Hey, this is kind of an experiment. And I think that approach and that openness, I'm really excited to see this thing. I think it's going to be great. What is the time frame? I don't want to put you on the spot, but what's the time frame that maybe prodders can listen? We call our listeners prodders. When can the prodders maybe see this?
Is that like cattle prod? Do I have to be worried?
Yes. Right.
Yes.
It is cattle prod.
That's at the end of the show.
I just puckered up somewhere involuntarily.
He looks nervous.
He's like, what did I get into?
Looking around. Like,
yeah. Bring out the gimp.
Let me go shut that door.
Oh, good. Deliverance meets Youngstown.
When can we expect to maybe see this, and where is this going to be, like on a website, or
it'll we'll create a Facebook event, and it'll also be on YouTube, and it'll it's because of the editing and all of that, and it's such a new thing. It'll be at the end of July, at some point, and as soon as I have a good sense of, I'm editing this in record time. You're a pro, how long it takes to edit 10 minutes. I'm like doing a 2.5 hour movie basically in like 3 weeks, so yeah. No
sleep for you.
Right. Yeah. You're gonna have a lot of sleepless nights. Yeah. You're gonna need some more of that Axio. Yeah. Michael was coming. I said, hey man, is there anything that you need, that you prefer? He says, I'm a little sleep deprived. And so I said,
you can't tell from my incoherence.
Yeah. I go, hey, we like to keep it loose. We might have a couple beers. Do you drink beer? He says, wine's good, or coffee. I said, we'll make you some coffee. And I said, how about if you want to try some Axio, it's a focus drink. So he sucked that down like in record time, as he said.
Yeah. Hey, Jim, Axio.
Now he's got the shakes.
Coming in the door.
Tell us about Cybil a little bit, though. I'm really interested because, people work their whole lives to be a staff writer on a major show. That was a major show. I don't know how long that ran on ABC. Was it ABC? I keep saying
it ran
ABC.
4 seasons.
Was it CBS?
It was CBS.
It was CBS.
Shot in CBS studios. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I was in over my head. Frankly. It happened so fast, and I remember going in to interview. I was interviewing for that, and and the George Wendt show at the same time. I don't know, that like lasted for one season. George Wendt played Norm on Cheers.
Yeah, right.
And Peter Tolan, who's an amazing writer, who was one of the big writers on the Gary Shandling show, which was really groundbreaking on HBO. He had been hired to do that. And so I went in and interviewed for both of them, and they both gave me offers. It was crazy. And I ended up writing like a couple spec scripts for him. But anyway, I went in.
For Wendt or for?
Yeah, for that one.
Yeah.
And Chuck Lorre, who was gone on to create Two and a Half Men and a million things. He created Cybil, and he had started with Roseanne, and he did Bread Under Fire with Grace. What was her name? Brett Butler. Brett Butler, who was literally insane. And we'd see feeds. They would have feeds on a TV. From other sets from the studio. It's just like you see in the movies. There's these giant buildings, and then you see Jerry Seinfeld go by in a golf cart, and so it was and it's a new show, so you have a smaller staff, but anyway, I remember going into audition for him, and he and the main producer were there, and Chuck was like sitting behind his desk with his big cigar, leaning back, looking at. It was like the most cliched Hollywood thing I'd ever seen, right? Looking back and giving me this intimidating look, and we interviewed, and he's like, I really like this piece, and and I said, and this is what did it, and I said, you know what, there's no way for you to know whether I can do this or not, but I guarantee you, if you hire me, it'll be the right choice. And I don't know even where
that's called big balls, Michael. Those are Youngstown balls.
Wheelbarrow.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if you know me, it's a rare occurrence. But,
it's all right. You were reaching for it.
But it was just I thought I got you have to rise above the white noise.
Yeah.
And my writing tends to be comedy writing tends to be a little subversive, a little farcical, a little sort of left of center, and I kind of was out of sync. If I had been 10 years younger when things like were 20 years, Arrested Development, that kind of thing, that wild kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And Seinfeld started, because back then, with the networks, you still had 20 million people would watch a show.
Right.
And so the studio execs would come in and, you can't say that, and that'll offend, and it turns into white bread.
Yeah, it was like a marketing seminar, homogenized.
And the other thing is, I am not a stand-up comic, and I sit at a typewriter, and I don't even know what happens, but I can write funny, right? And it's character-based usually. It's not like jokes.
Yeah, no punchlines.
My brother's also a writer, but sometimes he would say, how do you come up with these funny one-liners and stuff? And I'm like, dude, I have no idea, you still learn character and story structure and all that, and being an actor was very helpful, actually. And where was I going with this? Oh, and so I was there, and they hire a lot of stand-up comics, and they have, I think I was like the token New York playwright, basically. I remember I was sitting in the writer's room one day waiting like for the session to start, and I was reading a play. I was like all by myself, and Chuck Lorre walked in and looked down, and he went, literature? Fuck you. I was like, and it was terrifying because I've like in 3 times in my life, I've had a bolt of sheer terror go through me. The first one was when my dad dropped me off in Brooklyn, and as he drove away, I'd never been in an environment like that, and a friend was putting me up and I had a bullet. And this was the first, it was like not everybody was there yet. It was like a smaller meeting, and there were a couple of the staff guys, and they were so funny. They were stand-up comics. They were so funny. I had a bolt of sheer terror go through me. I thought, how the hell am I going to compete with this? And the way they write, to me, it's not even writing. Everybody sits in a room and they figure out the outline, and they send somebody off to do a rough draft and come back, and then they tear it to shreds and try to beat all the jokes and everything. And it's so time compressed. Time is the writer's friend. If you have the time to put something in a drawer and work on something else for a month, you come back and you have perspective. Mm-hmm. But when it's 3:00 in the morning Wednesday and you're shooting Friday, a joke that seems really, really funny when you've eaten like 3 power bars and haven't slept in 2 days, it tanks like Friday, and it's all that fast. So they wrote it that way, and I was just not, and you pitch jokes, and that was completely not my element. And I thought, I'm at UTA in this. I've got to justify my existence here. And so I kept trying to do it. I shot down. There was this guy who was getting like $20,000 a week, and this is in the mid-90s, and he had written for Love Boat.
$20,000 a week, man.
And I was like, I was writers. When you see the credits, you see all the producers, those are actually writers. Those are like the head writers, and I was a staff writer, so I didn't like. It's like the entry level thing. So only if I got a story by credit or a written by credit did you even see my name there. And so I'd be pitching these jokes, and the Love Boat guy looked at me and went, "Yeah, like that, but funny."
That made you feel good, huh?
Yeah. And then there was another guy, really funny guy, Mike Longworthy, who kind of took me under his wing. And in the show, there's a lot of waiting around and then doing stuff. Like you sit for 5 hours waiting to do a session. So that's why writers' places have pool tables and dartboards and so I was in with him, and he said, "Michael, I have never seen anybody who gets shot down as much as you and comes back and pitches another joke." And he said, "The first year I was on a show, I did not open my mouth." And I went, "You mean I could have done that?" I could have sat there and learned. I was just so afraid of getting fired, and you get somewhat better at it. But I kind of realized in a way that wasn't my thing. And like we talked about, Cybil fired Chuck Lorre and a lot of the staff the next year because she wasn't getting enough. She's not a diva. She's a very cool person, and she was a very female forward. She wouldn't take any shit, and from a very sexist Hollywood, and I respect her for that. I don't think she's gotten better as an actress her entire life. I mean, some of these people thought she was great, but she couldn't deliver a line. She couldn't deliver a laugh. Next to her is Christine Baranski,
who's just funny as hell.
And she's playing this half-drunk character half the time. And of course, the writers just grab. I mean, you can write stuff for her,
right?
She can walk into a wall and make the whole place.
Cybil played like the straight guy.
Well,
and she played like the right.
She didn't do that, and it was hard to write for her, and it was hard to. So anyway, and that's kind of craziness happens all the time. He created the show, and a year later he was not there, and so I was one of the ones, and then the next year, you know who this was? What is his name? He wrote American Beauty.
Alan Ball.
Alan Ball.
Yeah.
He kind of filled where I was, and they felt bad, and they gave me. The way the Writers Guild rules are, 2 scripts in a season have to be from a writer outside the staff. So I got the first year I'd only gotten like half story by, and so they gave me a couple, and my name was on it. But you turn in the draft, and then they do that thing, and I wasn't part of the staff there, so I just went and watched it, and there were 3 lines left that I had actually written. And it was much worse, if you ask me. And then it went up on network television, 20 million people, written by Michael Dempsey. I was appalled. I thought I have to have control somehow of my own work, and that's not in Hollywood. And then you go through a series of years with lots of near misses. You have to have, just like being an actor in New York, perseverance is almost more important than talent. And you'd get, you'd get a script optioned, or you get a script purchased even. They buy 20 times more than they actually make, So you may be making a great living and never see anything, And things happen. There's a whole tier of development people, producers on this level, executives on this level, And every one of them, their job depends on them saying yes to the right thing. If they say no to one bad project, they're fired. I mean, it's like turning doors in these studios. There's people shifting and moving to new jobs all the time, right? So part of the first couple of years, your agent sends you to a lot of get to know people meetings, and you pitch stuff, and they may, and she was, I mean, the first thing I told her when I got there in LA was like, I'm not going to write for Full House. I don't write that kind of comedy. And in fact, Cybil had been pitched to me as the American Ab Fab, and I don't know if listeners know it. Absolutely Fabulous was a British TV series that was really hilarious and farcical and out there, and there was the drunken friend, but the lead, Jennifer Saunders, is brilliant, and you can still watch it. And I thought, oh, this is exactly the way I write. And then it wasn't anything like that. And but anyway, so and you'd have a screenplay, and then it would start to go up the chain. I wrote this thing called Lame Duck about a suicidal president. He loses the election after the first term, and he's vilified as like the worst president that ever existed, and he's depressed, and he thinks the only way I'm going to go down in history for anything is if I can get myself assassinated before this term's over. So he hires these, like, he has to, how does a president, like, on the down low, hire assassins, right? So he gets the two most incompetent. It's almost like, this was before Dumb and Dumber, but it was basically Dumb and Dumber assassins hired to, and they loved it, and went up, and went to the next level, and went to the next level, and to the next level, and we're all getting more and more excited. And it went all the way to the top to be greenlit, which is what they call when there's a go to film. And we hear nothing. We hear nothing for months.
Who at this time, who purchases this? Who's got it?
You know what? I do not even remember what production company or had it at that point. I mean, I was going into meetings with, you go to a meeting with John Landis and you pitch something. He wants to do a TV series about an insane asylum, and all this, half this stuff never gets made. And she sent me to, I went to this pitch meeting with, and I didn't know what it was for, and I got in there, and it was, they were looking for a writer to do the new Pauly Shore movie. I don't know if you remember Pauly Shore.
Weasel, man.
Yeah. Never a fan.
He was a flash in the pan, right? And I went back to my agent, really? Pauly Shore? And these people, these guys, see, this is what I don't get. You're an executive at a film company. Wouldn't you know everything about film that ever existed, right? And back then there was a Northern Exposure. I don't know if you remember that. Was a TV series.
Sure.
And Adam Arkin was one of the leads. And his father, Alan Arkin, is a famous...
brilliant actor, yeah.
Catch-22 and The In-Laws and like an amazing, right? And so in the course of conversation, I said, I was talking about one of my scripts, somebody like Alan Arkin would be perfect for it. And he went, no, you mean Adam Arkin. I went, no. Alan Arkin is his father. Adam Arkin has a father who's an actor? And I'm like, what are you doing in this job? But anyway, so Lame Duck, it was called. It sat there, and then, do you remember Bulworth?
Oh yeah, love it.
Beatty?
Yeah, great movie.
It was in production. Same story, basically. He was a senator and all that, and
they killed
that,
it.
That kind of stuff happens over and over and over and over again, and then things happened. My folks got sick, and I met somebody in Cleveland who I fell in love with, and all that, and I came back and for a while, and then I went back out to the East Coast, and then the novel came about because 10 years ago my folks both got really sick, and I moved back and kind of became a caretaker, and for 10 years, and they both passed away last year, and so I thought, well, the odds of writing for film or TV from Ohio are kind of slim, and I mean, in terms of on the coasts, there's indie stuff going, obviously, and it's very strong, but so I thought, well, you can write a novel anywhere, so that's why I did it. So,
and that's how you ended up writing Necropolis, which is a cool. Like I'm holding it right now. Michael brought me a copy, and it's got such a cool cover to it. It's got this like neon thing happening with this detective who's looks like he's pulling like a 45 out of his trench coat, and the Rolls Royce, is that a Rolls Royce? It looks like a Rolls Royce.
Yeah, I don't know.
In the corner.
Yeah.
And man, it's like super cool. Where
it's like a floating car. The idea was, I loved old noir films. Humphrey Bogart.
Right. My favorite actor of all time.
Yeah, Raymond Chandler. And I also liked science fiction. And there's a movie called DOA from like the late 30s, early 40s. And it's about this guy who gets poisoned at a bar by somebody, but it's a slow-acting poison, so he's not going to be dead for 4 days. And so he has 4 days to solve his own murder before he dies. And I thought, oh, man, I loved that idea,
that's
right?
Great.
And I love science fiction. So I had written a screenplay version of this, and this, the premise is that I'm not going to go into the reasons. People are reanimating and coming back from the dead, and they're not zombies or anything. This was 30 years before the zombie craze hit, but they're back and they're real. So it's in the 50 years in the future, but you could see Jim Morrison walk down the street, for instance, and the culture is so freaked out, they sort of adopt this retro noir culture. So you'll have a Studebaker floating down the street it's called retrofuturism. It's what we thought the future was going to be like when in the past. So like floating cars and robots and, spires and all that stuff. And so I did a mashup, and that's basically, so I thought this guy comes back from the dead. He's a detective. He gets killed modern day. He comes back from the dead 50 years later. He's solving his own murder, So that's how I mashed it up. And I had, at that point, pretty much all my contacts had dried up, and plus the literary agent is completely different from all that. And I started from the drawing board again. I sent out the query letters. They call them query letters. You find the agents who will represent this kind of thing, and you send it out, and you don't hear back. And literally there are books written about how to do query letters.
How to write one, right?
Yeah. And you got to have a one-sentence description or two-sentence description that is going to hook them.
The log line.
Yeah, the log line, exactly. And you can spend forever working on that one line. And somebody said somebody gave me great advice. He said, if you can't put your story in one sentence or two, you don't know your story.
Right.
And that was a great. So I'm like, how do I do this? How do I do this? And finally I came up with this line. What is it?
In the future, where death is a thing of the past, how far would you go to solve your own murder? Dun,
yeah.
dun, dun.
Well, yeah, it's almost like in a world where.
Yeah. Did you see that movie?
Yes, that's a great movie. Yeah. Everybody go see.
World.
Yeah.
What's that called?
It's called In a World.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that's what it's called, and it's about like the daughter of the greatest voiceover talent. Yeah. And but it was it said future, it said past, right? And it said death is a thing of the future, and it says solve your murder. So it's like got all of this sort of elements, and so that was it. And of course, I had like some real credits, and I didn't hear anything for. I didn't hear anything, I had a couple passes. And of course, what they do is you send the query letter. It sounds interesting. Okay, send me an outline. You send an outline. Send me a chapter if they like that. Send me the whole book. And then they call it the slush pile. You send stuff in unsolicited. If you don't have an agent, you're sending it to agents. They may get it to it someday, if ever. And, or worse, they have readers.
Did it help you get the literary agent because you were repped by UTA and had written for Cybil?
No, like I said, it was so many years later.
Oh, right.
Yeah. And
so Cybil was 95, 96, and this is like 2010.
Yeah, it came out in 2011. So I was writing it in like 2009, 2010. And also, I called all my old agents, and then like, I don't know any literary agents. It's a completely different world.
Oh, okay.
And the literary agents often partner with people in LA to like sell the film rights. That's the only way you make money now. Writing a book, unfortunately. I was talking to a producer and telling me he was writing a book, and he was like, why don't I just give you the $800? I was like, oh, great.
That's encouraging.
And, well, how many people read fiction? I was like, this is the hopeful part of me. I thought, oh, COVID, people are stuck at home. At least they're going to read more. No, they're just binge watching Netflix, and there's nothing, and fiction especially, nobody reads. But, so I sent these out and I didn't hear anything. And then literally 6 months later, I was directing Jesus Christ Superstar in Canton, and this agent calls me that I don't know, and she's an agent in New York, and she's like, send me the book. I sent her the book. Great. She sells it instantly to this medium-sized press, science fiction fantasy press called Nightshade Books, and they published it, and it happened in 2011, which was, as I was telling you, the great publishing apocalypse where Borders went out of business, and Barnes and Noble and publishing companies were going out of business, consolidating, and because Amazon, that was the point. That was like the tipping point when Amazon was everything. And my publisher had was the big distribution deal was with Borders, and it closed like 2 months before.
Oh man.
So what are you gonna do?
Yeah.
It was a great experience, and it's like having 3 jobs. You basically, there used to be a day like in the 30s and 40s where like Ernest Hemingway, the editors at these places would be literate, amazing people, and they would help writers develop their craft. They would really work with them. I mean, there are major writers, Tennessee Williams is a playwright, Hemingway, they literally wouldn't be what they were without editors. And the 5 pillars, publishing and marketing and distribution and all that stuff that a traditional press does, they don't do anything now. They publish it physically and they still distribute it to stores where it'll last, 2 weeks or whatever. I mean, at least on Amazon, it still lasts. But so, I mean, I got an advance, which was better than most. And then, I just spent it all trying to publicize my book. And, there wasn't like a press agent setting up
interviews or book signings.
Yeah,
Did you do any of that stuff? Did you do any book signings?
I did. Yeah, I did some. But once again, I mean, everything was starting to shift online, and but I mean, there are some very talented local people who have also published books, and so it's changed a lot. I would probably self-publish now, because if you're doing all the work anyway, I mean, I think I would make, I don't know, what is it, 8% of every paperback sale or something. So it's but
the music business is like that now too. We just had last episode we had Jeff Burke on, who owns a Record Connection, and he was talking a little bit about the publishing and that kind of stuff in terms of the music business and how they get percentages for streams and percentages for downloads, but it's not.
Oh, they're screwed. Spotify and all that, which we love. What people don't realize too is the quality they're getting. I mean, I was an audiophile in high school, and I bought all the, I think it was Harman Kardon or something, I bought all those units, and, I would clean the LPs, and I even had reel-to-reel, which at the time was higher quality.
Yeah, right.
And when, people were doing 8 tracks, I was like, that's crap, and...
But you couldn't reel-to-reel in your car, though. That was the only thing.
And when you did mixtapes, buddy, you were like... you were editing it and then going back and retaping. You'd have your
love mix.
Oh, it was like John Cusack in High Fidelity.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You carefully crafted what flowed into the next thing, and okay, there needs to be, this one has to slam right into the next with no pause, and then this one there has to be just a beat. And now, of course, you can't. It's like
skip.
Well, like it was like when. Those albums that don't like the White Album, that just roll into it, and the first 2 notes start from the end of the next note, and then there's a pause, because it's, the track, and you're like, oh, you bastards, But, the MP3, that's just all really low quality.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with streaming online. Like a Blu-ray has much more information on it, I mean, that's okay, fine. Now there's 4K in the streaming, it'll all be, But that's me, the curmudgeon. I'm just, all you kids, get off of my lawn. That's the age I'm getting to.
What year did you because I want to date you a little bit.
Here we go. Thank you for asking.
Yep. What year did you graduate from Boardman High School?
1980.
Oh my God! Yeah, I thought you were gonna say like 85 or 89, something around
1980, and they had. I mean, it was like a national class orchestra. We would go to New York and win national competitions.
Their band's always been big.
Well, I was just gonna ask, was Tom Groth there at the time?
Tom Groth. They had 300-piece. Yeah, and it's like.
Tom Groth is the executive director of the W.D. Packard band.
Is he really? I didn't even know that.
Yeah, and he was the band director at Boardman.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
You'd see him like standing on a giant step ladder, while all the people were marching and stuff, and they were really strong. And Carol Clark was the orchestra director, and she was like amazing. She's what turned it. We were playing hard stuff, and it was sort of. They were down in the wing. They didn't have the whole theater built yet or anything. And you'd spend first period and second period and lunch down there in chamber orchestra. It was like our own little clique. And I don't know whether we were considered geeks or not. It wasn't actually kind of like that for some reason. I don't know why. We probably didn't care because we were all smoking pot anyway. But I shouldn't tell these stories.
All the jazz musicians were smoking marijuana.
But the band was Wilder, and I had some friends that were in both, and Tom Groth was trying to get me to like learn trumpet or something like that, and Carol Clark, you can't have him. I was like concertmaster, and some of the time, and so I figured out, okay, I'll be the videographer. I'll be the videographer's assistant. So I can go. I mean, you learned about life in the back of a band bus. That's where you learned about life, making out and people and craziness. And so, yeah, I wanted to be on those band trips. But, it was pretty, the stuff that you could do then, I mean, I feel bad for kids. But see, it was more innocent. It wasn't like there was meth and crack and,
right.
I mean, there was that stuff out there, but it was just not the same.
It was on the peripheral.
It'd be like winter time, and we would schlep out to the woods near the building and get high and come back. I mean, reeking of weed, and we'd be soaked up to our thighs because that's how high the snow was. Nobody said anything. There weren't any guards. There wasn't. But also, of course, there wasn't. My brother's gay, for instance, and I didn't even know it till college because people didn't come out, and there was, and I'm sure there were a lot of awful things. I was living in my little white privilege bubble, but anyway, Boardman was a great place to grow up, and
Do you still play? You still play the violin?
Once in a while, I actually played it in a show a musical that I was acting in up in Cleveland, called. See, here's where my brain goes. I played this character called the Man in the Yellow Suit. It was Tuck Everlasting. It's called. So it's sort of like a fantasy, and I was the bad guy. And I don't normally get to play it, and so I played the violin. And once in a while, somebody, I've been in Fiddler on the Roof like 4 times on all these different roles, and finally somebody said, "Hey, can you come do the fiddler and sit on the roof?" And I'm like, I've done Fiddler on the Roof like 4 times. And let me tell you, I thought I was just gonna have to play da 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 da, right? And then I get there, I'm like, no, you're gonna go over the pit and play violin in the pit for the rest of the show, so you have to learn the whole score. And I pulled the violin out after 10 years of not playing it, and I did some real woodshedding. I was on there. I was scared to death.
Shaking off the ring rust.
Oh, man. Well, violin it's not, guitars have frets and stuff. It's all, muscle memory. And so, it's just out of tune and horrible for a while, I don't know how parents suffer. It's probably the second worst thing to having a drummer son. Because for years it's, and anyway, but music, comedy is very musical, timing and all of that, and you learn that, and it's sort of teachable and sort of not. Mm-hmm. Tom Fulton, who's playing King Lear, he's like the whole package. He teaches He teaches an arts program, Chagrin Valley, really amazing high school arts program. And he can sing and he can act, and he's a director. He directed me in The Seagull, and up at Beck, and he's a great teacher and all that. And we were just talking about, comedy and comic timing and stuff. And it's rare. And you need great actors. It's hard to find them, it's hard to find them sometimes. Like, I'm probably going to get into more little indie filmmaking stuff. I do comedy sketches and shows, plays that it could easily be adapted to low budget filmmaking. But I mean, the fundraising is going to be about getting really great comic actors.
Right.
Because, we were
talking about this here. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the bulk of indie filmmaking are thrillers usually, or horror or whatever. I used to, for a while, I went to this Cleveland film group, and like every single movie was a horror movie. And there's nothing wrong with that, whatsoever. But comedy scares the crap out of people. It's really
because people can't deliver it. That's the hardest part. It's hard to do. Not that they can't, but it's more difficult.
It's hard to write, and it's hard to direct, and it's hard to. You got to get really actors who can do that. And then the other thing is, we're in a period. It's like the Judd Apatow, Will Ferrell, Seth Rogen stuff. I love those movies. 4-Year-Old Virgin, and all that. All Forward, Bridesmaids. All that stuff's fantastic, but it's not. It's like set a camera on actors and let them improv around a framework, and it's very different. You and I did a workshop with Austin Pendleton, a brilliant actor, and he was in the famous Barbra Streisand movie What's Up, Doc, which is Peter Bogdanovich directed, and it's one of my favorite movies. And it's a farce, and farce is like a very artificially constructed thing, and it's you don't improv in farce. It's like a clockwork kind of thing, doors opening and slamming and people getting locked in closets and craziness, and that wasn't. That's sort of how I write, in a very, and an actor who substitutes one word can kill the joke. Can look the wrong way, can have just the tiniest, you can say the joke almost exactly the same, and
it's like a difference between a half a beat and a full beat, and that kills the whole.
Or tone, or right. I mean, and so, so I like directing comedy. I don't get a chance to do it much. I somehow got known for musicals around here, and so that's mostly what I get, even though I'm a comedy writer, so...
Well, you wrote a really funny you mentioned we met at the Trumbull New Theater,
right.
And Austin Pendleton, who Barry and I both worked with on a test scene for our film East Side Irish, was there, and he came and did our show. He's season 2's first episode. So if prodders are listening and you want to listen to Austin talk about acting and Barbra Streisand and whatnot,
it's amazing.
And so I think actually the two of us probably had the most challenging.
Talk about balls. You went up there and did Glengarry Glen Ross, man.
Well, and I didn't know at the time. I wanted to connect with him and have him on the show. So I was like, man, I want to have him on the podcast. And he was in town to do this actors workshop. And I thought, well, man, this is a great opportunity for me just to kind of like go and dick around a little bit, and I'll go to the actors workshop.
But you were really good. And the other thing is you took direction well. See, again, that's what it's...
Got to kill your darlings, man. That's.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, you work on something and you see it one way, and then... you were doing the Alec Baldwin monologue, which is so aggressive, right? And it's just nothing but swear words, and
that's right up his alley.
Yeah,
that's why it was good. That's why I was
right. And then he had you do it sitting down.
That was so hard, man.
It was so hard, but it was an exercise. It wasn't because you were doing it wrong. It was like, well, let's see what happens. And I thought, He's never. How could you do that? And it was interesting. You had to pull way back, but you found this way to be aggressive in another way, And Lear is like that because Lear is going mad, and he's done this horrible. He's doesn't know his own daughters, and they're screwing him. And the one daughter who loves him, he banishes in just a moment of kind of craziness, impulsivity, and so he's slowly going mad, and the country's falling apart, and there's all this stuff happening, and there's a lot of raging in it. And I've seen really good actors like Ian Holm, who just passed away, bless his soul, brilliant actor, and Anthony Hopkins. They made a movie recently with him, and all they do is yell, and after a while you're like, I'm tired of it, because even though he does horrible things, you have to still feel sympathy for him. And I connected with that piece because, my mother had Alzheimer's, and my father, they were 91 and 90, and my father was at times very difficult, loving but difficult, and elder care and all that. And those themes were all in King Lear. And so I knew. So when Tom and I work, Tom's so good, and he's willing, to try a bunch of things, and it's all about sort of finding ways to shape it, and so it's not just 2 hours of raging, and he's developed some really cool moments. It's fascinating the whole time, and he's a sympathetic character at the end, which he has to be. Anthony Hopkins, you watch the first scene, and you're like, oh, fuck him. I'm never going to feel, and that's Anthony Hopkins. That's how hard Shakespeare is. So, but go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, you've challenged yourself with Lear, similar to how you challenged yourself with that scene. The scene that you did, I did the Glenn Ross, which,
right.
Thank you for saying that. And it was fun to do, but I could watch Alec Baldwin, who's great, and they wrote that scene for.
Yeah.
I could watch that over and over and over for a couple of days and kind of learn it or whatever. And then I didn't realize at the time when I got there that Pendleton had just come off playing the Jack Lemmon character at the Cleveland Playhouse, and I was like, I'm doing Glenn Ross, and like I hear like these like laughs in the audience, like, oh, what the fuck's this guy doing?
Yeah, and I went, oh,
yeah, right.
I bet he doesn't know.
I had no clue.
Yeah, I would have auditioned for that because I was in this other show, Tuck, but I was really disappointed, Austin Pendleton has.
Well, that's what I say though. You got up there and did an original piece, which was yours, which I think is infinitely harder, especially with someone of Pendleton's caliber.
Back to the wheelbarrow.
Oh, yeah, huge ball. Yeah. Michael Dempsey, big balls.
No. Well, see, it's like I'm not the kind of guy. It's like the Jerry Seinfeld story, which I don't know if I told here or earlier. I drove into L.A. and
you told me.
I literally pulled in and bumped.
You should have totally threw that fucking script at him. Been like, "Yo, Jerry."
Yeah, here you go, bud.
Yeah, 10 minutes into L.A., there's Jerry Seinfeld thinking I'm like a stalker or something, and there's a Seinfeld spec script in my car, and it's like, how much of an asshole am I going to be doing? And I'm not. I'm just. That kind of stuff, mobbing somebody and trying to get selfies.
Yeah,
I tend not to do that.
Yeah. You want to be a star fucker.
But I thought, you know what? I can do a monologue. You never know. I can do an original. Plus, I started really late, and I knew it better than starting from scratch.
It was really good, though. Like, and I'm not saying that because you're here. Like, it was really good. And I thought what was brilliant about Pendleton is that he'd find these things, and obviously he's got a plethora of experience, and he's done so much. The little tweaks that I would think would be, not significant were so significant to the scene. Just like you'd mentioned, like, okay, sit down. Because I was using the ranting, walking around the stage as a crutch a little bit because I'm inexperienced and I didn't really know what the fuck I was doing. But same thing with your scene. He gave you a couple notes, and I think you went before me, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. Well, he gave me one note, and it was about starting, and it's something I even know. When you do a monologue, you're talking to somebody who doesn't exist, and so you have to put them out there in the audience, and be in your imagination. And I've even told this, you have to take a beat before you start and create that and then go. And I was nervous and I didn't do that. I just kind of stumbled into it. And he gave me that note. And then we started talking about New York and Cybil and Peter Bogdanovich, and there was no more acting. And so then I sat down and he started working with other people, and I started getting really paranoid. I thought, I'm so bad, I'm not worth trying to work with. It's either that or I was good. I couldn't tell, but it was cool because it was like the first person I've talked to in 20 years who like knew all these little New York theaters that don't exist anymore that I did stuff in. But the one thing is he's a really supportive coach. Yeah. I mean, they're
positive reinforcement.
Yeah, that sucked.
Right.
And everything was very positive and supportive. And Philip Seymour Hoffman said about Austin Pendleton, you know how there are 6 degrees of separation? Theater and film, with Austin, there's 1 degree of separation. He literally worked with everyone in the 20th century, and those stories he told.
Oh, man.
I could listen to him forever.
Well, it was crazy to have him up here because I forgot some of the things that he was in, and he started talking about another plug for episode 1 of season 2.
There you go.
He was talking about what's the guy's name in Gladiator?
Russell Crowe?
Russell Crowe. They did A Beautiful Mind together.
Oh, yeah.
And this is to kind of go back to what you had originally started with. I woke up at 4:30 in the morning and I started to write. You got to be able to put the time in. And then Barry and I always talk about this. Like, it's important to be a artist, but as an artist, you need to be a supporter of other artists. Because otherwise you're just, an asshole kind of, right? You need to kind of support other people. So Pendleton was having trouble delivering these lines, cross camera. Russell wasn't even on camera. And Russell stayed in makeup. This is when he's in like the old man part of the film. And he stayed in makeup so that Pendleton could play off of him. And I thought,
oh, yeah.
And they're there for hours.
Oh, yeah.
In fucking makers. It's hot. It's in the summer. I thought to myself, that's a professional, man. Yeah. That's like some awesome shit there.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. I mean, actors don't always do that. I was a PA on a Bruce Willis movie, and that's why actors have trailers, because it takes 4 hours to set up a shot. Yeah. And then he and Danny Aiello are doing a scene. They do the master, they do the 2-shot, and then Bruce goes back into his trailer and his body double is the over-the-shoulder shot. You see a guy's shoulder and it's not even him, And then you're acting with like the stage manager, and we're going to have to do some of that in this. And so
with
that's
Lear.
Yeah. You can't get everybody together.
What film was that?
Hudson Hawk. It was written by Dan Waters, who had come off of Heathers.
Oh, yeah.
And the director, I don't even remember his name, and it was his first giant movie. And Joel Silver, who was the big action producer of the 80s.
Lethal Weapon and all that stuff.
And like a maniac. He'd be standing in the middle of 57th Street or the Brooklyn Bridge, which they shut down. Like, I'm standing on the Brooklyn Bridge. That was like the end
scene, right?
Yeah, and he'd be shouting in a bullhorn, "Where the fuck is the helicopter?" and I was a PA, and I was assigned to be his New York assistant. And then he came in with this whole giant staff, and I literally had nothing to do. I was getting paid like $500 a week to watch them make this movie, mostly.
It's not bad getting there.
Yeah. Michael Lehman was the director, and he was in over his head, and it's just weird stuff happens. It's like one night they're going location scouting in New York, and, this is before cell phones. This is... this is before, like, film. and so they're driving around, and I get this call, you have to go pick up Michael Lehman's car at this thing. They've left it, and pick it up and bring it back to the office. And it's like a Porsche or something. And
you smoked some weed, and then you went and picked it up.
And you wrecked it.
No, I couldn't get it for some reason, and I couldn't get a hold of I had it. I got it, and I brought it back, and there was nobody there. And he wasn't there. And this is not like there's a place to park. So I've got this guy's, the director's car, and I don't know what to do with it, and I can't get a hold of anybody,
Oh, man.
And there's a.
So did you steal it?
I was gonna say, did you take it down and go to the hooker district?
I lived in Brooklyn, and I literally had never driven in New York. I was terrified. Even driving it back to the offices, it was like if I get a ding on this thing, and but it was. And I had some jobs, like he had a trailer that had to be fully stocked with chocolate Yoo-hoo at all times. So that was my job.
Michael Lehman did.
Joel Silver.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Joel Silver. And, and it's funny because you don't think you get starstruck. I'm not a very starstruck guy, but I remember the first time I saw Bruce Willis, I was leaving the office. This would be pre-production, and he was coming off the elevator and going toward the office. It's just me and him in a hallway. And we pass, and he kind of, hi. He gives me this weird look, and I realize I've got this giant shit-eating grin on my face like a psycho. And I went, what the hell? But you know what I did? Joel Silver was developing all these scripts, and they had Arnold Schwarzenegger scripts, some of which got made and some of which didn't. And so one of my jobs was to go to the Xerox machine and make copies, and I would make an extra copy for myself. I would steal it. These are and I would go home and I'd read them, because I wanted to learn how to do it. But yeah, and you think they're organized, but they're not. There was a restaurant scene in Weehawken and with Danny Aiello, and his bar had turned into like a guy's bar to this fashion bar, and there were like runway models and fashion shows on all the TVs, and these geniuses had not remembered that film runs at 24 frames per second and video runs at 30, something else, right. And you get the roll bars, and the day before they shot. And this is the other thing. How many companies are there that can do conversion? This is New York. There's got to be. I did like the O.J. Simpson thing, like those old, the Samsonite commercials where he's running through the airport. They handed these films off to me, and they put me on a red eye to L.A. in the middle of the night with these things. And I ran to this office, and I sat on the couch for 2 hours, and they did the conversion. Then there was 3 hours before my flight back, and the limo picked me up and took me to this house, and they said, go in that room, you can sleep in that room. I opened the door, and it's dead black, and I hear this voice going, hi, I'm Chip. Like, what? And I'm like, hi, Chip, where do I lay down,
Lay down with me. Come here.
And I 3 hours later, a limo picks me up, takes me to the airport. I go back and I hand off the film, and they do this show. But it's like, really? And how much money that's why films cost so much money.
Oh, yeah. I was PAing as on second unit this is the first big film I worked on. It was Captain America Winter Soldier. It was filmed up in Cleveland.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
And the first day, call time is like weird hours. Like, it's not like 6 a.m. It was like 6:11, And so I was like, what the fuck? Okay. So, and I'm not a morning person, okay? So I get up extra early. I get ready. I show up. I'm early. Blah, blah, blah. We do our lockdowns. We shoot some stuff for the day. And they're like, okay, we're going to break for lunch. I'm like, all right, cool. So you go down here and you're going to go break for lunch. And we go in, and they're 300 people. This is second unit. This isn't even like, they're shooting stunts and shit. So there's tons of PAs and tons of stuntmen and tons of camera support and the drivers for the crane cars and all this other crazy shit. And we're all in this, I think it was like in the terminal building. I can't really remember, but we're all in there, and you go in and they're serving filet and lobster tail and fucking like shit that I was like, I'm from the indie world. Like, you got a slice of pizza and a granola bar, and you were like, holy shit, man. Yeah. We're doing good on this set. Like,
and it was Domino's, not Wedgwood.
Right, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I've thought to myself, so I was like, I said, am I in the right line? They're like, yeah, get whatever you want.
Yeah, you're going to get arrested if you pick up a piece of lobster.
That's what I thought. I was like, holy shit. And I don't even eat lobster, mind you, but I fucking ate 2 lobster tails that day.
Hell yeah.
He was like, I got one. He said, do you want some lobster? I was like, yeah. He's like, you want another one? I was, yeah, sure. I'll take another one. I ate filet and lobster on the first day, and I thought to myself, this is why these movies cost, you know,
why it costs
$300 million.
$50 to go see with your kids.
Right.
Well, yeah, and they call it craft services,
Right,
you know, film
right.
and TV, and yeah, it's always a banquet. And
Set up, man. It was
however,
set up.
you know, but people are also working 16 hours.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say.
You know.
Right. The very first day, it was a 14-and-a-half-hour day. People were bunking up. I was older. I mean, I was 34, 35. I was 35. My son had just been born. So there were guys that were like crashing, like 4 guys at a Motel 8 sleeping like 30 miles outside of the city. And I was staying in like a Renaissance. You know, I actually had 2 ticks was paying for me. You know, my production company was paying for me to stay there. So I stayed right downtown. And cats were like, yo, hey, is it cool? Like, can I pay you to crash in your hotel room? And I'm like, no, man. Like, I appreciate it, but like, I need my sleep. And So I go to bed. Went home afterwards. I got something to eat. And I think the Winking Lizard was below me of the Renaissance. And I got a couple beers and I called my wife and I talked to her and I went to bed and I woke up 2 hours. I have to get up like 2 hours before I got to be somewhere. I can't be like 15 minutes. I got like a whole preparation thing.
Me too.
And I get up and I'm so fucking sore. And I didn't really do anything other than like, you know, flag people down. And, you know, we were in lockdown. They were doing all these stunt things and flipping cars and shit like that. We're making sure like pedestrians weren't going to get killed walking to work.
Right.
I was so sore that this was after one day. I literally, for about 10 minutes, thought, I'm done. Like, I'm 35 years old. I got my own production company. Like, fuck it. I make more money making commercials than I'm making doing this thing. And I was like, in my head, I'm like, I'm not going to let these young cats. I was the oldest PA there, probably. I'm like, I'm not going to let these young cats beat me. So I ate 3 Advils, washed it down with a cup of coffee, and showed up again and just kept grinding for a couple more weeks. But it was a hard fucking job, man, I could tell you.
You should let Chip stay with you. He would have rubbed you down.
Yeah. You can come in and lay down here.
Well, that's why, you know, the actors' contracts have so much in them. You know, they have to have, because it's hard, you know.
Yeah.
And, you know, and then you have to be vulnerable and have a sex scene or a breakdown, and there's like a guy a foot away from you,
Right.
you know, like some techie holding, you know, a mic or something. But, you know, it's interesting because COVID, I think, has just accelerated the trend, first of all, away from theaters and and seeing movies in theaters, which I think is a shame because starting from live theater, you know, live theater is a way cultures evaluated and processed the things going on in their lives and their society, like together, going all the way back to Greek plays and comedies, and so that's kind of sad, but you know, and you know, the film industry is never going to be the same. You know, it's going to be changed in ways, and so the acceleration toward watching at home and streaming, and then also the rise of the indie filmmaker, I think, is going to be accelerated now, and partially because, you know, you can shoot a movie on your iPhone, you know,
right?
And so that's exciting, you know, and that's what was exciting about Lear. It's like, okay, I've never done this before. Let's see what we can do, you know, and I like it, you know. I wish I was getting more sleep, but I like it, you know. So I think that's, you know, you were talking about, you know, courage and all that, and I tell people, being an artist, every time you create something, whether it's a role or a film or a book, it's an act of courage, a creative courage, because especially if you put yourself into it, it goes out there and you're naked, you know, and then it gets torn apart, it gets loved, you know, you're never gonna, you know, and of course now in this online world, everyone feels they are
everybody's a critic,
legitimate critic,
right.
and so, you know, and like it's all stars. I remember Goodreads is a literary like website, you know, that rates books and book lovers, and and Amazon, and you'll get 1 star out of 5. Like one guy gave me 1 star out of 5 because I use the words concrete and cement interchangeably, and they're not the same thing, and I shouldn't have done that. And it's like, wow. So stuff like that you see. Like now I'm at 4.5 stars, and maybe somebody won't buy my book now. That's a hard world to deal with, and the smart people on Twitter, the smart celebrities, they don't let themselves get sucked into stuff because you just can't, and it's horrible. I mean, like Game of Thrones, the author, being harassed by, his fans because the book's not coming out fast enough.
Right.
What a horror. Talk about how to give him more of writer's block.
Impressing him.
Well, I wanted to ask you earlier too. I forgot. You would talk about timeline, and certainly the concept of art is never finished; it's just abandoned. Barry's a painter; these are all Barry's paintings and things. You're working on a timeline for Cybil or for other like gig for hires. What's the timeline for Cybil?
A show a week, 30 minutes a week. I mean, you're working ahead.
How many writers are on that show?
Well, see, every year they add more. If it's successful, I mean, by the end of Roseanne, they had 30 writers, and she'd like, I want my chauffeur to be on the writing staff. I want, Tom Arnold,
Yeah.
Really, literally, her chauffeur was,
really?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
I mean, at that point, of course, it's making.
She's making millions.
I think
and
the
millions of
first year of Cybil, there was maybe 10, 12. And then.
Did you get fired with Chuck Lorre at that time?
Well, yeah, it happened in a couple little waves, and nobody. I knew I wasn't coming back at the end of the first year, and I didn't know he had been fired yet until somebody else contacted me, and I mean,
cutthroat, man.
Yeah, I mean, Peter Tolan, a great writer, the George Wendt show. I thought that actor was good as Norm, but he can't carry a whole show, no matter how good it is. And it lasted a season.
Yeah.
And then he went on, but Peter Tolan and Judd Apatow, they're like buds and grew up together. And but Judd Apatow tells a great story because he has a lot of reads, developing scripts and stuff. And he said, it doesn't matter what level of genius you're at. He said it's like Albert Brooks and Gary Shandling would disagree about a scene, and so you've always got to develop your voice and follow your own instincts, and you can't worry too much about the naysayers. There's always people like that for whatever reason.
If you had some advice for young starting out writers, aside from have thick skin and work your ass off, what are the couple of pieces there?
Well, I mean, educate yourself. Working your ass off means learning the craft, because it's technique and craft, and it's about finding a way to put yourself into it, personally, and that's how it happens.
So reading and
watching everything, and
digesting,
and there's projects. Never been the resources have never, YouTube and masterclass,
right.
And people have never had access like that. So there's no excuse when somebody comes and they don't, know something they should. It's kind of like, wow.
Like, hey, I want to be a writer. Here, you want to check out my screenplay? And then you get it, and it's like improperly formatted.
Yeah,
you're like, what the fuck?
I had dinner with a guy who is an aspiring comedy writer who just met me, and he spent the whole night telling me about his stuff, and he didn't ask me one question. And I thought, what a wasted... I sound like I'm God's gift to comedy or anything,
right.
But I mean, if I was just starting out and there was a comedy writer in the room, I'd be picking his brain, right?
Yeah, right.
And so
right.
That's what you got to do, and you just got to keep at it and trust yourself.
Michael, after King Lear, I know maybe you're not looking that far in advance because it seems like it's probably a very insurmountable thing.
Never
at this
gonna
time. What's next for you, man? What do you feel like is on the horizon?
Well, originally the plan, after my folks died, I thought, well, I mean, sort of, it was a terrible thing, but I was also freed up for the first time, in many years, and I was gonna this winter. I mean, I was committed to Lear and I was committed to TEDx, which also got canceled. I was going to move back out to LA. I thought, you know what? I'm 57 years old. You know, a guy like me breaking in again after the 90s. You know, what are the odds? But I would never forgive myself if I didn't like give it a shot. And so I've been writing. I started writing screenplays. I'm writing comedy screenplays, and it's the same thing. You get up early. If you don't get it done first thing in the morning, that's more advice. Before life comes in, don't look at your email. Don't do anything. If you're doing research on the internet, do not allow yourself to get sucked sideways into, you know, carve out that time first thing when you're fresh, because it'll never happen if, you know. And but now, of course, COVID hit, and who knows. So I think I'm going to focus more on like indie stuff and the online thing. I think that's really fascinating. So
I think that's great advice.
Yeah.
I was always like a late night guy in my 20s.
Yeah.
And it was easier because we didn't have kids at the time, we weren't married. You know,
I'm still a late night guy, but it's 9 o'clock now. It's late.
right.
That's the difference.
But I'd go to like the 2 a.m, be smoking, you know, maybe imbibing a little bit. And, you know, now it's the same thing with working out. I feel like by the time the end of the day comes, like I'm too tired to work out. Like I don't want to do jujitsu at 8 o'clock at night. I got to do it at 8 o'clock in the morning. I don't know if I can. It's been very, very challenging, even with COVID, to write at night after I'm spent and I've taken phone calls and I've done emails all day and I'm educating my son and all that stuff. So I think that's brilliant advice. I think you're giving listeners great advice. Like start early before you're fresh.
But do it any way you can. If it's not possible, you find a way to do it.
For sure, yeah.
Even if it's this amazing energy drink you gave me that's going to keep me bouncing off the walls for the rest of the day.
You can take one of those in your pocket too, because I know you're
very good.
Yeah, I got a rehearsal later, a Zoom rehearsal.
Yeah. Well, listen, man, we're going to let you go because I know that you have Lear to work on and other things. I want to tell you, I'm really appreciative. Barry and I are very appreciative of you coming and sharing your knowledge with us and with the prodders out there. I think you've given some amazing advice. Please do me a favor. Send me the link and send us the link to Lear so we can share it, you know, when it's all finished, and we'll get that out for you.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
I will. It'll be the end of this month at some point. So, and thank you for having me. What fun.
Man, awesome. We're looking forward to Lear and some of the other stuff. Maybe, who knows? Maybe we'll be producing some indie comedy stuff here later on in 20 or 2021.
Hey, I'm seeing this professional green screen behind me and just like coveting it.
Go ahead, take it. I won't say nothing.
It folds up actually. You can fold it up, man. It may take us 20 minutes to do it, but it actually folds up.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, listeners, lovers, and friends, thank you for sharing some time with us today. You can find Michael Dempsey at where exactly?
You can find me on Facebook. I make websites for other people and LinkedIn, and I'm like the worst for myself. So
it's always the car mechanic.
I swear to God,
he fixes other people's cars, but he's driving a piece of shit.
I don't even have a website. Facebook, though. Facebook, yeah.
Michael Dempsey at Facebook. He is the author of Necropolis. Be on the lookout for King Lear. Directed by Michael Dempsey, coming soon. Until the next time, stay electrified and keep on prodding out there, folks. We'll catch you again soon. Stay safe. As Michael Rappaport says, wear your fucking mask, people.
That's right.
Thanks, Mike. We appreciate you, man.
Thanks, buddy.